Hello and welcome again to my channel J. Labamba to chapter 7 of Drugged, the Science and Culture Behind Psychotropic Drugs. This chapter is titled Harry in Toronto. Let's do it. Uh, Harry in Toronto is the title, and it talks about eugenics and cannabis. The sixth chapter, as has been introduced, was about chloral hydrate, meprobamate, melton, equanyl, barbiturate. All these medications seem to have been the John Baptist, the heralded the upcoming of benzodiazepines. These medications have in common many properties. They are all muscle relaxant, hypnotics, anesthetics, anti-epileptics, and anxiolytics. I refer you to my previous live to know more about those meds. Both science and serendipity share the merit for the discovery of those meds, according to the author, a pattern that has been seen throughout the history of medications as has been presented in this book. Well, in this chapter, we are going to talk about not only about psychotropic substance with the psychedelic properties, we are also going to be exposed to the shocking news, at least to me, that eugenics and race purification is something that was started in the US, and it goes hand in hand with the war on cannabis because of its connection with immigrants and jazz entertainment. The chapter starts with talking about Harry Aslinger in an almost fictional narrative that shows how Harry comes home from hard working day, and wanting to relax, turn on the radio on the Lone Ranger, a radio show in the 1930s. The ranger who fights crime in the Old West. He identified with the hero, of course, but did not have it for Tonto, the degenerate native Indian who probably got his wisdom from smoking Mr. Muggles, to quote the author. Mr. Muggle refers to Indian hemp, Harry publicly referred to as such. Now, let's know who is Harry Aslinger. Harry Aslinger is an American European from European descent, son of a railroad worker, a job he himself started at but was lucky enough to rise in status after he had had some college education and became a railroad investigator. He ended up busting $50,000 fraudulent deal, which had gained him some reputation of integrity and fame or notoriety depending on perspectives. Harry is presented in the book as a white European supremacist who thought all the other races are inferior gene carriers, that the Nordic white stock and gene pool is put the Nordic white stock and gene pool at risk of contamination. According to the book, Aslinger believed that science had proven beyond any doubt that Nordic whites gave the best genes and are therefore destined to run the world, and interracial marriage is a race suicide. Harry believed that there are patriotic forces like himself who are vehemently trying to stop or reverse the process of racial contamination. Those honorable white folks uh, passed laws in favor of sterilization of weak genes, such as the epileptics, morons, imbeciles, and undesirables, such as niggers. Eugenics record office at Cold Spring harbor was led by people of similar attitude. It was a pioneering cutting-edge science institution in the fields of race and genes, founded by a professor named Charles Davenport. Such institution gave the legal system in USA the scientific evidence-based support needed to pass eugenic laws. According to the book, Harry Aslinger's enthusiasm was greatly boosted by listening to lectures on eugenics by professors such as Harry Laughlin. Um, Harry, better, he had caught news of Herr Hitler, the German chancellor, at the time that he had passed racial laws and eugenic laws based on the sterilization laws passed in USA. Harry Aslinger, as have been mentioned, got some college education that had him rise in status as a railroad police officer or investigator. He kept his job throughout World War I. He had been stationed in many countries and became polyglot. He became an influential officer of control during the Prohibition as an assistant commissioner in the Prohibition Bureau, and that was cancelled after a few scandals and resurrected as the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, the FBN, with Harry Aslinger as a commissioner. As such, he became more equipped to fight his wars on drugs and against racial corruption. The heroin problem, while still existing, had been handled by the legal system. He also knew that sometimes politics, for the sake of the country, can turn a blank eye on certain matters, such as certain narco-operatives and dealers, for example, the despicable Chiang Kai-shek. So he had to do the same. Now, let's talk about the vilification of hemp, and that's the next section. The Mexican immigration to Southwest and Texas started at the beginning of the 20th century. They were laborers who worked on farms, and they gradually spread throughout the Northeast. They were needed cheap labor, but as the Great Depression crept on the country in the year 1929, they became a nuisance job competition as Americans were becoming unemployed and needed jobs. They also were resented on a moral basis. They had a national habit, an addiction to marijuana, which used to be called Indian hemp in USA. It was cultivated and grown all over the country for its hemp fiber, useful for cloth, paper, and rope, while the seeds were used for oil. Farmers were required by law to grow hemp in the United States of America. George Washington had a hemp plantation. The Declaration of Independence was drafted on paper made of hemp, of Indian hemp. Eating or smoking the plant would produce a powerful psychological effect, according to Harry Aslinger, as quoted in the book. Now, hemp was known as marijuana, written with an H, or cannabis, became a problem only with the Mexicans, as Mexicans flooded big cities such as New York City and Chicago. Their habits spread to black jazz entertainers in big speakeasies, places, and whites who frequented such places. And this is all from Harry Aslinger's point of view. Now, again, if I am I am reporting what has come in the book, and these are facts. I googled them also, and found out that lots that what's on the media is basically a duplicate of what I have in this book. As Mexicans flooded big cities such as New York City and Chicago, their habits spread to black jazz entertainers in big speakeasies, places, and whites who frequented such places. Such menacing phenomenon could not slip Harry Aslinger's attention and concern, so he conducted and got and gathered info from reliable sources that marijuana was the most dangerous drug. He had, uh, therefore, to sound alarms. So the FBN, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, um, in his person, had to alert the American people to the problem. A move that aimed at validating the importance of the FBN and highlights the importance of Harry Aslinger as a patriot voice. Unlike cocaine and heroin that involved powerful international cartels, marijuana was trafficked by Mexicans and blacks. He was, his task was easier and did have, uh, didn't have to involve the FBI. It was their business to handle the other cartels, but it was his to lead this campaign. He even outstaged the head of the FBI back then, J. Edgar Hoover. He was supported in his crusade by three powerful families. He was married to Andrew Mellon's daughter. He was supported by William Randolph Hearst and the DuPont family. All the three families had industries of paper and synthetics such as nylon and were threatened by the hemp industry as isolation of fiber from the hemp plant became ridiculously easy with the introduction of machinery such as the decorticator. Before it was very difficult and needed lots of laborers, but now it has become easier. So for them it was a threat, and those were powerful families. So what the book implies, it was he his campaign was more of a, he was a person of interest, in addition to his very fanatic beliefs. His allies were obviously ready to support his campaign for white supremacy and racial purity, which were threatened by marijuana minority dealers. He collected the Gore files, scripts from newspapers that depicted stories of horrible crimes caused by smoking marijuana. The Gore files portrayed the circles of marijuana smokers as nymphomaniacs, rapists, killers, violent people, and then white women who visited such circles got raped and got sexually involved with Negroes or inferior races and gave birth to children, corrupting thus the genetic pool. Such risk is also very current in universities, was also became prevalent in universities, where white women could get duped by Negroes who trapped them into a relationship using the racial oppression card. He collected stories of very violent crimes committed even by kids who smoked marijuana, such as the teenager who killed all his family by one axe and had no recollection he did so. He was known as an ordinary teen to the officers and he smoked muggles. So Harry also used media such as movies Other than the written press, he made movies on the horrors of marijuana that were assigned as educational materials in schools for teachers, parents, and students. Uh, One example of these movies is Reefer Madness, which was a good move, you know, sensitizing the population to the danger of psychedelics, especially younger people. So prior to the 1960s, marijuana was not a middle class issue. So the first federal attempt to place restriction on marijuana came with the Tax Act in 1937. They passed a law that said $100 per ounce for any use of marijuana, from growing it to selling it to even prescribing it for medicinal use. The extreme bureaucratic policies and financially stringent costs blocked all legal trade of hemp. Such legal measures affected the hemp industry for fiber, oil, and cloth and paper, but boosted the rivalry production and sales. Marijuana has become nationally ostracized and even removed from the American pharmacopoeia following the Tax Act that was all to Harry Aslinger's ferocious campaign. Americans were once again encouraged to grow it for the industrial production of oil and fiber during World War II. Once again, Harry Aslinger had to reignite his campaign after the war had ended. He even campaigned for the elimination of wild growing one. Aggressive campaign of arrests and trials had been launched against dealers and handlers, especially after the quote-unquote temporary insanity that was marijuana induced started to be used in criminal defenses and murder trials. 1950s Act imposed extremely severe restrictions even to first-time possession uh, and in fines and imprisonment. That was called the Bugs Act. Is an example actually. Challengers to such acts found it as an unconstitutional, which led to its being replaced by the Controlled Substance Act of 1970s that placed marijuana as Schedule 1, side by side with LSD, classifying it as high potential abuse substance with no clinical value. Now, the many uses of marijuana. Is there any actual merit to its clinical potential or its danger to society? The author believes that Harry Aslinger's attitude has been lingering and leading governmental policies until nowadays. Newer understanding of the mechanism of action of the notorious weed equipped science with the ability to provide better answers. Let's see what they are. The author had to run few historical facts before that about hemp cultivation and uses as detailed in this section. Cannabis and marijuana, or marijuana, are hemp plants, also known Indian hemp, that has been a major source for cloth, rope, oil, and canvas. And the word canvas is derived from cannabis. The plant can grow anywhere, on any soil, and can get to impressive heights with modest requirements for water and prefers temperate weathers and exposure to the sun when possible. It can grow as high as 10 feet. Amateurs' research on how to better boost its psychedelic effect has been extensive and posed questions such as, should it be grown inside or outside? Would would hydroponics be more useful in optimizing its effects? Uh, so, 1953, the Swedish father of botany and taxonomy, Carl Linnaeus, described hemp as belonging to the genus cannabis and named it cannabis sativa. Cannabis, after the Greek uh, name for the hemp, cannabis, and written with K instead of C, and sativa means cultivated. And he was named as the father of botany and taxonomy because he was the first one to classify plants, and then he gave them two. They were like divided in two parts: Greek name, and then the what's their uses. So other suggested genera is Cannabis radialis and Cannabis indica. The latter grows in a rich, the latter is richer in psychoactive substance, while C. sativa is better source for fiber. C. sativa is known for its widely spaced branches and serrated leaves. Cannabis, we all have seen those pictures of those four leaves that are widely spaced and serrated. The stem is hard as it is concentrated in fiber but hollow. The seeds were used to get oil and feed animals. Any residue can sprout bushes. Now, retting was the traditional method to get fiber for ropes and cloth. It relies on soaking the plant in water or exposing the hemp to humidity till it swells and loses its fiber. The remaining bust is turned into fiber and cloth. Marijuana, cannabis, and hashish. The psychoactive substance can be found anywhere on the plants, but more concentrated in the resinous substance secreted by trichomes or trichomes. Hemp plants are dioecious. That means we have the male plant and the female plant. The male plant produces pollens while the female plants produce seeds. One way to produce a rich psychoactive content is to remove the male plant and pollinate the female cannabis pods filled with more resin, a concentrated psychoactive chemical, and this is what's called in Spanish the Sinsemilla method, without seeds. Smoking the dried flowering tops is another way of preparing the female cannabis, labeled as the marijuana postgrass weed. It is also prepared as a drink, such as in India, and it's called bhang lassi. It is also prepared as a drink in India, and in Morocco. It is mixed with tobacco and called keef. I didn't know that, but I've known it in this book. I know I had an uncle who smoked keef, but it was just tobacco. He rolled tobacco in joints and smoked it. But again, I've never seen any psychoactive effect from him. So, in Morocco, it is mixed with tobacco and smoked. Hashish, on the other hand, is pure resin, dried into crumbly blocks, also known as charas by Indians. It is most concentrated in cannabis psychoactive chemical. When smoked, the cannabis enters the richly vascularized lungs, travels through the bloodstream, and reaches the brain very rapidly. Hashish can also be baked into cookies, brownies, and cooked into delicious candy. Hashish candies were available to the public for purchase in the US prior to being criminalized. Give me some candy hashish and then you go and buy it. So China and Persia. Now we are still following the historical facts and similar to the poppy plants, Papaver somniferum, remember that's how it is classified, known scientifically, hemp has been used by humans since very ancient times. It transitioned from wild weed to useful plant, but what was it used for? Though in those ancient times, that's what the author said we need to know. 10,000 BC, Hawaiian pottery relics revealed pressed hemp, ropes, and cloth uh, on pottery um, for decoration. The remains of hemp rope and cloth were excavated from 4000 BC archaeological site in China. It was characterized as an important plant together with rice, barley, millet, soy during the warring states in China period 221 BC to 447 AC, and we are talking about the warring states in China. So during those times, it was considered a very important, valuable source of produce, such as rice, barley, millet, and soy. The father of Chinese medicine, Shen Nong, around 2000 BC, advised the usage of concoction of a sea sativa or tea for a variety of disorders, including malaria. He believed that excess could lead to seeing demons, which is a very ancient reference to the psychedelic effects of the plants, visual hallucinations. Taoism was also linked to the use of cannabis, and that was about 6000 BC in China. Ancient Chinese doctors used it as a tincture for anesthesia and surgeries. The Indian Vedic scriptures around 1500 BC mentioned cannabis. The god Shiva ate some while taking shade in a field of sativa and found them scrumptious, according to the author, and that's how people started to go and have the plants and take it the same way to feel that kind of connection with that kind of God. Unlike what we have seen in chapter 1, when there was a debate about the identity of the soma drink and whether the Amanita muscaria was what ruled the concoction, there is no reported debate about the identity of sativa when talking about those drinks that were prepared by ancient Indians, namely because, for example, the ingredient of bhang, which was an edible preparation, relied entirely on the sativa, and is still used, the author says. Taoism was also associated with the use of cannabis around 6000 BC. It was also featured in other ancient traditions such as Buddhism, Tantrism, and Zoroastrianism. The Avesta, the sacred text of Zoroaster and ancient Persia, rated it as the most important plant. It was widely used in South Asia, India, and China. The British colonized and India that was high on cannabis. What I meant is it was widely used in those territories, and that's the land the British back then, as colonizers, stepped into. Europe has used it very anciently. Excavated Neolithic graves reveal remains of hemp seed. The author believes they might have been brought by Indo-Aryan nomads. There is also evidence that cannabis has been used for religious purposes. Herodotus, the Greek historian, described Byzantine funerals rituals in Macedonia, East Asia, East Europe. Scythians threw the weed in the burial site, ignite the fire, inhale the smoke, and howl. That's how they were described. The Scorides and Galen described its psychoactive effects in their writings. Romans used it for cloth, robe. In fact, it was not used for recreational purpose in Europe in this era, by the Romans. Now, in the least comparable to southern or eastern Asia, Europeans' exploration to those areas reinitiated them to the psychedelic uses of cannabis. Marco Polo documented that the Muslim leader Hassan ibn Sabbah, a descendant of Fatima Zahra, the daughter of Prophet, who was in northern Asia, trained fearless young soldiers by dragging them and taking them to a secret magical garden, and then have their every whims of theirs catered for, including being waited on by houris, beautiful angel-like women, then dragged them back and got them out of the garden. And once they're out of the garden, they were informed that they had a glimpse of heaven, and if they fought for Islam, fought for him, they go to heaven. And if they die, they go to that heaven. Those soldiers were called hashashin, and it is said here that it was the hashashin is a Romanized word for assassin, but then again, assassin is not Arabic, so it's probably that's how it is, because weed in Arabic is called hashish. So they helped him with most northern Persia. They helped those hashashin or combat soldiers that were on a psychedelic substance, helped that leader to win most northern Persia. The legend Ismailis group that swept all over Europe and spread fear among crusaders used hashish. Such stories, the author says, were just romanticized stories about brave-hearted assassins or hashashin, but they still persisted and could be, he said, they could be debunked easily. But you know, Harry Aslinger used such stories to support his claim against cannabis and how it makes them people crazy and violent, and that's why it should be criminalized. Cannabis and the West. That's what I will talk about in next time. I will talk about that, and we will get into the detail, the chemical details about how the substance, how it works, about its isolation, about many other things. So I'll leave you on these terms and hope I'll see you very soon. Have a nice night.